Okay. Tonight's guest speaker is Kate Boyd, a wildlife rehabilitator and zoologist dedicated to protecting the unique reptiles and amphibians of Colorado. With a background in zoology, animal rescue, and wildlife rehabilitation, Kate has spent 10 years working with and advocating for the preservation of these fascinating creatures. As the president of the Reptile and Amphibian Center of the Rockies, they lead education programs, provide daily care for numerous rescue animals and animal ambassadors, and collaborate with local community groups to promote coexistence with our reptile and amphibian neighbors. Join Kate as they share their knowledge, stories, and tips for getting involved in conservation efforts during their upcoming presentation. Kate, I hand it off to you.
All right.
Yes.
All right. Sounds good. Can everybody hear me? All right. Awesome. Thank you for the amazing introduction. I'm really excited to talk to you guys today about maybe something that's a little bit different than what you're used to hearing about here. Some of our scaly friends and some of our amphibian friends as well.
Hi.
Oh, did I do that or did you?
I think that'd be that.
Okay. Well,
That's not working over there.
all right. Sounds good. Thank you. So as I am Kate, and I am with the Reptile and Amphibian Center of the Rockies. I am one of our board directors, a wildlife rehabilitator, and I've been working with these animals, our reptiles and amphibians, for the past 10 years in a lot of different capacities. There we go. Our organization, we are here solely to promote the welfare and conservation of reptiles and amphibians, and we do that in a couple of different capacities through education, rescue, and rehabilitation. So first and foremost, our education. And this is something that we've been doing really, really heavily in this year in 2024 and hope to expand a lot in 2025. So we do a couple different facets with our education programs. All of our education programs are donation-based, so we don't want our education to have any bars to the community. We also do a lot of public outreach programs to the community and guided nature walks, wildlife advice, as well as husbandry education for pet owners too. And I have a little highlight here on one of our animal ambassadors who helps us with their education. Her name is Ducky, and she is here with me today. And I think I'm going to bring her out so you guys can see her quick. But then at the end, I will bring out both of our animal ambassadors so you guys can come up and see them up close. But I'll bring up our little friends now so that all the folks on Zoom can see them as well. Okay, I think we should be good. All right, first off, we have Ducky. Ducky is an ornate box turtle, and she is a native species here to Colorado. Ornate box turtles typically live out on the plains areas, and they get their name, the ornate part, because of their beautiful shell. Their shell pattern has that kind of dark brown background with some bright yellow stripes all along the shell, and it stands out to us in captivity. It looks very beautiful, very bright, but out in the wild, they use that extremely for, oh, sorry, the microphone's better. I think I got it. They use that color, that striping, for camouflage, and they blend in super, super well with the prairie grasses, so much so that a lot of folks don't even know we have these turtles here in Colorado. And Ducky is here with us. She is in captivity and has been with us since about 2016. She was actually found around Horseshoe Reservoir. Somebody was out hiking, they saw her, and they gave us a call and sent us a photo of her because they didn't know if she was a native species. They didn't know if she was okay to be out in the wild. And we're really glad that they did because she has some abnormalities to her shell that make it so that she can no longer survive in the wild. So she has a bend that you guys can probably see there in the back of the shell. And that bends down and kind of makes it so she has a lot less room inside of her shell to do the thing that box turtles need to be able to do to survive in the wild. So on the bottom of their shell, called their plastron, They have a little hinge that runs across the bottom area. And it's hard to see from afar, but you guys will be able to come up and see it up close later. But that little hinge is where box turtles kind of get their name, because they can pull into their shell and close up the front and back of their shell to literally box themselves in to stay safe from predators and to help them hibernate over the winter. So Miss Ducky here, because she has that bend in her shell, she cannot use that hinge whatsoever. She also has some abnormalities to her jaw, where she can no longer close it all of the way. So she can't eat solid foods in the wild, and she wouldn't be able to stay safe from predators. So that's why she's in captivity with us, and we're very grateful to the folks who found her. But the reason she has these deformities is due to captive care and improper captive care, to be specific. So Miss Ducky here, she was likely taken from the wild as a little baby, kept in captivity for a number of years and not provided the correct UVB lighting and food and nutrition that she needs to grow and to thrive. So her bones actually developed in a way that is abnormal and not great for her long-term health. And so Ducky here, she's gonna live out the rest of her life with us, which is hopefully a very long time. Box turtles can live well past their 30s in captivity, and we estimate Ducky is around 15 years old right now. But I'll come back to Ducky in a little bit. I'm just gonna get her settled back in her little box here. All right. And so, speaking of animals we have in our care, we also do rescue. That is a huge part of what our organization does. We take in animals, whether they are displaced from folks finding them in the produce section of a Whole Foods, if they accidentally got tipped with some food, which we have right now. We have a little anole named Mango that was found in the produce section. We can also take in animals that are captive pets that people own, that maybe sometimes life circumstances change. These animals are very long-lived. It's hard for people to keep them throughout their entire lifespan. So we take these animals in from just individuals, from the public, from accidental hitchhikers at a Whole Foods, to transfers from other shelter partners throughout the state when they don't quite know exactly how to work with these animals, don't quite have the expertise to care for them as we can. And so our rescue promotes husbandry, proper husbandry of these animals, as well as prevents invasive species. Because there are a lot of species in captivity with our reptiles that, if released into the wild, can survive and then, unfortunately, thrive and harm our native species. And I just wanted to highlight one of our rescues that we had until last week. Chip, the bearded dragon, he was surrendered to us in June 2023. He was extremely emaciated with very limited mobility in all of his limbs. And our reptile friends in captivity, they have not been in our care as long as some of our mammal friends, like our dogs and cats. So their medical needs can be a little more complicated, a little more tricky. And so Chip underwent a bunch of diagnostics with our partners at the veterinary teaching hospital. And we did physical therapy. He gained a lot of weight, and so excitedly, he actually went home with one of his vet techs last week. I'm very excited for Chip. And finally, the final facet of our organization is conservation work. And we do that with field surveys, natural area cleanup, partnering with wildlife rehabilitation, and offering humane solutions to folks. Sometimes we get calls from the public about maybe they found a den of garter snakes in their yard, or they're concerned about rattlesnakes moving into their neighborhood. So we're able to work with folks, educate them about why those animals are important to have in our neighborhoods and our homes, and how to interact with them safely. And to highlight our field surveys, which it is the season, you guys have probably heard this week a lot, and maybe even today, frogs singing. All of our amphibians are out and about, and our reptiles too. All of the animals are coming out, being very vocal, and it is the season for field surveys. And we do that with a combination of citizen science, data collection, restoration initiatives, and also inspiring the public with education too. So we take folks out from the public, we go out into our natural areas, we clean up those spaces, we educate them about the animals that live there, and we just have a really good time too. It's a lot of fun. So let's talk specifically about our native species. In Colorado, we have around 74 different species of reptiles and amphibians throughout the state. Not nearly as many as our birds or our mammals that we might see or you guys might be familiar with, but still quite a few. And they live pretty much everywhere, from our grasslands to riparian zones, all the way up into kind of the mountain areas near Estes Park. And to highlight some of our different groups, a couple of different species that we commonly see for our snake friends. Our bull snakes are one of our most common species. They do get quite large. They can get up to 6 feet, and they have a lot of varying personalities. Some of you may have had run-ins with bull snakes that are really great. Some of you might not have such a great opinion of our bull snake friends, depending on which one you ran into. Our garter snake, very common to see in our yards and homes. We have a lot of different varieties of garter snakes, but the plains garter snake is the one that you'll most typically see in our area here. And of course, we have the racer snake, which if you've seen it in the wild, you have very good eyes, you're very quick, because they are, as their name implies, very fast. They race right through the grass. And they are very feisty. When working with these animals, I would say the racer snake is definitely the most fightable friend. Ooh, before I click the next button, the next slide is just an example of a bull snake that is doing a great demonstration of showing off just how big and loud they can be to deter a potential predator. They have a special structure in their glottis, the little hole in their mouth that they breathe through, called a crista ventralis, that lets them have a very loud and very kind of scary sounding hiss. Okay, well, if it doesn't work, imagine a very scary rattlesnake hissing sound. Okay, I can hear another computer, but it's really quiet. But the fact that I can even hear another computer. But their posture as well is also one that is very iconic. We see that in a lot of snakes in their defensive postures. They're showing us that they are nervous. They want us to go away and give them some space. Oh, yes. Okay. Oh, you're good. And for our snake friends that you definitely want.
Sorry.
Oh, you're good.
There you go.
And that one doesn't have sound, so we're good there. And for our snake friends that you probably do not want to interact with up close, with one exception, in Colorado, we have a couple of different venomous species. We have the prairie rattlesnake, which is the only rattlesnake you're going to see here in northern Colorado. It's the only one you have to worry about on the trail. And just giving them a good bit of distance is all they need. We also have the Massasauga here in Colorado, which is a smaller rattlesnake species, typically found in the southern parts of the state. And last, but certainly not least, is the hognose snake. They are very cute, and they are technically venomous, but their venom is medically insignificant to humans. It is geared towards very small mammals and amphibians only. These little snakes are fossorial, so they spend a lot of their time underground. They're pretty hard to spot in the wild because of how much time they spend burrowed underground. But when they're not underground, if they are threatened by a potential predator, they are the most dramatic snake species on the planet, and they are very, very funny. So the next video I have here is a clip of a eastern hognose snake doing his very dramatic display of playing dead. So this species, when threatened, they'll puff up a little bit, and if they're extremely threatened, they will pretend to dramatically die in front of their predator. So that little one there, he's opening his mouth, he's hanging his tongue out to the side, and he is just doing his best to look like he is so sick and dying. He's doing a great job. And they are so committed to their role when they're playing dead that after they die in front of that predator, they will do everything they can to quote unquote remain dead. Sometimes these animals can even burst capillaries in their mouth to bleed a little bit to make it even more convincing. And they'll continue to flip themselves back over. Very, very committed.
They have Oscars for snakes.
If they do, that one's one. Absolutely. And speaking of these little guys, I actually have one with me tonight. And I'm going to bring him out so you can see him a little bit but he's so small that it'll be pretty hard to see him, until we're all done and you guys can come up and get up close.
How big do they get?
Well, they stay pretty small. Let me grab our little friend here and I'll show you. I'll put them like down for just a second. So this is my little friend Herman. And he is a Western hognose snake. You'll notice his coloration is a little different from the video of our Eastern hognose snake friend there. And he is around, he's gonna be 12 years old this year. So he is as big as he's gonna get. He's fully grown. These little ones, the species is actually sexually dimorphic. So the males are about half the size of the females. So he is pretty small for a male in general. And then he is a boy, so he's about half the size as we typically see the females in the wild. But they are a super cute, pretty personable species, all things considered. They have a very adorable little upturned nose on the front of their face, where it is called a rostral scale. And it's very hard, it's upturned, and it allows them to dig and to burrow underground. So he uses his little hognose, his little shovel, to dig and burrow to stay safe underground. But he's an awesome little guy. These guys, we can expect Herman here to live hopefully well into his 20s. And my personal expectation is he lives well into his 30s, maybe 40s. I hope he stays with us a very long time. And we are seeing a big increase in the lifespan of reptiles in captivity, with better increases in technology and just husbandry practices and research as well. So hopefully he lives well past the current expected lifespan for these little guys. And again, I'll bring Herman out at the very end so you guys can see him up close, because I know he's so small you probably can't see much other than like a wiggly little worm in the back. I'm gonna put him back, and that'll take me a sec, and then we'll move on. And if you guys have questions at all, feel free to like interrupt me, shout it out. We can definitely go over questions now or at the end.
Would their numbers go down because of the reptile trade, the illegal trade that people try to catch and keep them as pets and stuff?
Yeah, will their numbers go down in the wild if people take them in from the wild and keep them as captive pets? The answer is yes, and there's actually a new law, well, I say new, it's about 9 years old at this point, where in Colorado you cannot buy or sell hognose snakes. It is still legal to keep them. So if you do have one, it is still legal to keep it as a pet. They are very common in the pet trade all throughout the United States. But that law has gone into effect to help these animals so that people are not poaching them from the wild to then sell them in the pet trade. And so Herman here, he was actually bred in captivity before that law went into effect. He was kept in pretty poor conditions for the first about 9 years of his life before he was brought back to the pet store he was originally bought from. That pet store, of course, could no longer sell Herman, so they gave us a call and we took him in. So that's why he's with us instead of out in the wild. He's been captive bred. He does not know how to play dead like our little friend there from the video. So he definitely would struggle to be out in the wild. And I think he does like being in captivity a little bit. So moving on from our snake friends, we do have a lot of lizards here. And some of the common ones that you'll see, the prairie lizard is definitely the most commonly seen species around here in Fort Collins and in northern Colorado. Devil's backbone is a great spot to see them, and of course along lots of fences and on the sides of houses is where they like to hang out. They're a pretty cool species that is also kind of like our friend Herman here. They are sexually dimorphic. The males have some beautiful blue iridescence on their chins and on the sides of their bellies that they can flare out. And it's especially prominent in about midsummer around June. We also have six-lined race runners here. These are very impressive to spot because they are just a quick little flash in the underbrush. Very difficult to see. Their striped pattern helps to break up their shape, so it's even harder for us to like spot them and focus on them. And one of my favorite lizards, the short-horned lizard, is a native here. They're typically found out on the plains areas. They're small, they're short. Sometimes they're called the horny toad is their nickname. So a lot of people think that they are toads or frogs because they have very short, tiny, stubby little tails. They're very cute. They have a lot of spines on their body. They also have a very unique predator deterrent adaptation. They will actually shoot blood out of their eyes to deter a predator Supposedly that was evolved to help fend off coyotes. And it is allegedly a very bitter and foul smelling secretion that they kind of squirt out of their eyes. I have never had the pleasure of experiencing it. I hope I never do. But they are really cool species and have such a unique, weird adaptation that we can, it just feels like it's such an exotic thing, but it's right here in Fort Collins. It's really cool. And of course we have our turtles. We have about 6 different species of turtles throughout the state. The most common ones we'll see here, and they are coming out, so we're seeing them right now, are our snapping turtles, our painted turtle, and our ornate box turtles like Becky. And so these guys are coming out right now. It is the time of the season where they are out basking on their logs. They're starting to move around for the year. Something to kind of keep an eye on is them crossing the road. And for our turtle, does anybody know what you're supposed to do if you see a turtle crossing the road?
Take them across the way they were heading.
Take them across the way they were heading. That's exactly right. Turtles have a very strong sense of direction, and they are very stubborn about it too. So if you do see a turtle crossing the road, even if they were leaving a pond and going towards a parking lot or something, it's always better to help them in the direction they were headed. If they're heading towards a parking lot or some very urban area, if you have the time and the means to, taking them in the direction they were headed to the closest grassy area is always really helpful for them. But taking a turtle back to the pond that it was coming out of is actually detrimental to them because they will just turn around and try and cross that road again and put themselves right back in danger. So helping our turtle friends cross the road is a really easy way to help our reptile friends, and it can really make a big impact on these animals that are very long-lived.
Yeah, apple.
That is a huge snapping turtle. Some of them around here, our common snapping turtles, can get upwards of 50+ pounds. And there are a couple of famous snapping turtles just right here in town. Some have nicknames, some don't. There's one particular one on the Spring Creek Trail that is very iconic. She has like a big bend in her shell, and she tends to be pretty like personable with people. I do not recommend you approach a snapping turtle, of course. That particular snapping turtle doesn't seem to be scared around people. They tend to walk right up on the path. We don't know if she was originally in captivity or she's just so used to a lot of people around her space. There's also one in Riverbend Pond that is missing his right eye, and that is his picture right there. So it's kind of cool to be able to see these animals, see what they can survive through, and continue to thrive throughout their lives, despite missing an eye or having a shell that's not quite the right shape. So these animals are really amazing. Our snapping turtles are one of my favorite species. They're really cool. And our amphibians. We don't have as many amphibians here as we do our reptiles, but there are still plenty around. The ones we're going to see a lot of right here in Fort Collins, and especially right now at this time of the season, are our woodhouses toads and our chorus frogs. If you've heard a frog calling in the past week or so, chances are very high it was a chorus frog. If you hear a lot of chirping noises, that is the chorus of the chorus frog. They tend to all call together and make a beautiful, as their name implies, chorus. And our woodhouses toads have a long, low whir kind of call. And so if you hear a very long call that's a pretty long duration, around like 15 seconds, that is most likely a woodhouse toad. Very cute little species. We also have one species of salamander here in the state, the tiger salamander. They're an awesome species that actually, despite being an amphibian, they actually out in the prairies, kind of pretty far away from water too. They spend the first part of their life in a larval stage, in their aquatic larval stage, but then they transform into their terrestrial morph phase, where they go on land, and then they kind of traverse and keep going east out into the plains areas. And this species is one that shares burrows with other animals as well. Sometimes you'll find tiger salamanders down in prairie dog burrows, highlighting just how important our prairie dogs are as a keystone species, because they are habitat for our tiger salamanders, as well as the box turtles too. Box turtles, rattlesnakes, they will all share those dens with those prairie dogs. And we have questions.
I was up at Sprague Lake the other day and there was tons of, you could hear frogs, couldn't see them. Was that the chorus frog?
If you heard a lot of frogs all at once and they just kept going, and it was a lot of little calls all together, those ones they are actually above water, but they are teeny tiny, our forest frogs. They are usually about like an inch in length, and they are really, really elusive. A lot of the time you'll hear them, you can be looking for them for a very long time from personal experience and never see them, but be able to hear them really close by.
Questions and comments, for the folks online.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that one was just about hearing some different calls locally here to wonder if those were the forest frogs. And all of these animals that live here are reptiles and amphibians, as well as our birds and mammals. They are facing a lot of challenges and threats, a lot of which will probably be familiar to you guys for our birds as well. But our habitat loss and fragmentation, climate change impact, human-wildlife conflict, invasive species, and emerging diseases are all doing a lot of detrimental effects to our reptiles and our amphibians, and in particular our amphibians. Amphibian species globally are in significant decline. They are actually declining at such a rate that 40% of our total global amphibian population is either threatened, going extinct, or critically endangered.
I have a question about the tiger salamanders. I've seen them sold at bait shops live. What is the legalities or issues with?
Yeah, tiger salamanders, they have a lot of interesting legal ramifications. So the question was if they are sold in bait shops. I think that is a practice that is kind of on its way out, thankfully. There are laws in Colorado that prevent people from taking in a certain number from the wild as adult tiger salamanders, but the larval forms don't have a limit on their take amount, which is very interesting, confusing, and difficult for a lot of people to like understand and for us to manage that ethically too. So that is something that we hope to improve on in the future, working with Colorado Parks and Wildlife to help our native species like our tiger salamanders to make those laws, those regulations a little more easy to understand, make them make sense, and to help our species that are in such significant decline. And something else that in particular for our amphibians is hitting them really hard is something called chytrid fungal disease or chytridiomycosis. It's a technical term. And this is a fungal disease that is infecting over 700 different species around the world. It is the #1 killer of amphibians worldwide. There is a different variation of it that affects salamanders that thankfully is not in the United States yet. It is over in Europe, causing a lot of damage. But thankfully here in the United States, where we have the highest variation of species in the world for salamanders, we haven't seen it here yet. And part of that is due to how we are being able to protect these animals from this disease that I will share with y'all on the next slide. But first, I want to talk about how this works. How chytridiomycosis works on our amphibians. It is a fungus and it burrows into the skin of our amphibians and it feeds on the keratin that is naturally in their skin. And it causes hyperkeratinosis and lesions and wounds on their bodies. And eventually it gets so bad that that damage is irreparable and that animal is no longer able to respirate, absorb water, and do other essential functions. For our amphibians, their skin is everything. It's so important to their general function that anything that inhibits that really, really is a huge detriment to them. And the more their skin is damaged, the harder of a time they're gonna have until eventually they succumb to death from chytridiomycosis. And toads are more susceptible because they have more keratin in their skin for that fungus to feed off of. And so here in Colorado, our boreal toads are an endangered species that is susceptible and does have chytridiomycosis in populations here locally. Even just in Estes Park, there have been confirmed cases of chytridiomycosis. So being able to slow this spread locally and globally is so important for our amphibians, not only our native species right here, but all over the world. And so to prevent the spread, it's actually pretty simple. For us humans, all we need to do is if we're going on hikes, washing gear between those hikes, going from area to area, making sure that we're disinfecting our gear like our boots, or maybe we have waders or nets, things that we're going out into our natural areas with when we go home from those, or when maybe if you're feeling really ambitious about it, right when you get back to your car, you have a little spray bottle of a bleach solution, and it only needs to be 3% bleach to kill that fungus. to make sure it does not spread. And chytridiomycosis thrives in cold and wet environments. So being able to dry out your gear between uses will most likely kill that fungus as well. So just giving a little spritz with a bleach solution and drying your gear out completely before going to a different natural area is all you need to do to completely halt your chances of spreading that fungus around. So pretty simple things we can do. And we can also report concerns. So disease management agencies rely on the public support to be able to monitor these diseases, find places where there are new outbreaks, and be able to focus restoration initiatives to mitigate those outbreaks. So reporting any animals that you see that are ill, maybe you see a group of deceased animals, being able to report that to different agencies is really helpful. A couple of different ones that you can report to. Of course, there's the USGS National Wildlife Health Center. Those ones you can actually submit specimens to. So if you have an animal that you found that is deceased, that you think succumbed to a disease in particular, you really want to know, you can actually send them that specimen. There's also partners in amphibian and reptile conservation. They actually have a particular team that focuses just on disease alert systems in reptiles and amphibians. So they are great to contact. And I have a little handout too that has some of these links if you guys want that at the end. And iNaturalist. How many of you are familiar with iNaturalist? A lot, pretty much everybody in here. It is a fantastic app on your phone and a website too, to upload pictures of animals that you've seen in the wild, record those data collections. And then also there are different projects you can join, which you guys might be familiar with too if you have a project going. But there is one in particular that's focused on wildlife disease and morbidity that you can join and submit any like deceased or ill animal sightings to. And that helps us to be able to track where these are happening, to see any like flows in particular regions where something might be spreading. So it is really, really helpful to report those. And so with our wildlife conflicts, our diseases, potential invasive species, we're seeing a lot of impact with our reptiles and amphibians, in particular the amphibians, with them being such a big group of animals that's in such significant decline. It is really important that we focus on helping these animals because they are not only food sources for a lot of different animals, they are also important predators that help keep our ecosystems balanced with our insects. And amphibians are also really good indicator species for environmental changes. So if we are monitoring a population of frogs in a pond and those frogs are doing really well, chances are that environment is doing really well. If we see a population of frogs that we've been monitoring for years and all of a sudden they tank, we know something's wrong in that environment. We know that we need to do something to test the water quality, to check on potential disease outbreaks, because those animals are going to decline quickly. And invasive species are definitely taking their toll on our native species as well. Captive animals that are released into the wild can cause a lot of damage. Here in Colorado, we have a couple different invasive species that are causing problems for our amphibians and our reptiles, one of which are red-eared slider turtles. If you've seen a turtle basking on a log that has a red ear, kind of red splotch on the side of their head, that is actually an invasive animal, and they do outcompete our native painted turtles here. So that is something that is causing problems, and that is particularly due to the captive pet trade. Red-eared slider turtles, they are very hardy, they're very long-lived, and aquatic turtles are just generally really difficult to take care of. So we get a lot of folks that buy a cute little baby aquatic turtle for their kiddo. About 5 years later, that turtle is now 10 inches long, needs about a pond, and a filter that costs about $400 just to be able to keep that water filtered appropriately so that they are able to stay in that home. And a lot of people don't have those resources. And unfortunately, there are so many red-eared sliders in captivity that a lot of rescues reach capacity and are not able to accept them into their care. So unfortunately, the next thing that those pet owners do is they will choose to release that animal into the wild because they don't want to kill their own animal, but they can't take care of it anymore. So for those animals, they get released into the wild, and our red-eared sliders, being very hardy as they are, they survive and they thrive, and they are very prolific. And so they take up the space, that niche that our painted turtles would otherwise fill. We also have bullfrogs here that are invasive and causing problems for a lot of our northern leopard frogs and other frog species. Not only do they outcompete them for food resources, but they will eat them as resources as well. Bullfrogs are very voracious eaters. There have been documented cases of them just jumping and grabbing birds out of the air. They eat anything and everything that can fit in their mouth. So for them to be in this range that is not native for them, that's causing a lot of problems, not only for our other amphibians, but also for many others. So what's being done to help these animals with all these challenges and threats? There are a lot of awesome conservation movements going on right now, not only with projects that we're doing with the Reptile and Amphibian Center, but also our partnering organizations. There are habitat restoration initiatives, as well as habitat maintenance, as well as disease monitoring, research, wildlife rehabilitation, population monitoring, and the biggest one, in my opinion, is education. The more people that know about these animals, that can learn to love our native species, the more each individual is going to help and want to help our local native species, which is so important, because even if we have a very dedicated group of folks who want to help these animals thrive, we can't do it alone. There's too many humans. So all of us need to do our part. And education, I think, is the biggest part in that. That's going to help. And then I wanted to highlight a little bit on wildlife rehabilitation and some of the patients I've worked with in the past. With wildlife rehabilitation or reptiles and amphibians, some of the most common injuries we see are pretty much all human caused or human wildlife conflicts, being hit by a car or a bike, entrapment or entanglement in bird netting, glue traps, fishing litter, and of course attacks by cats and dogs. You guys are probably very familiar with how much wildlife our outdoor cats end up taking out every year. And not only is that our birds and our mammals, but it's our reptiles and our amphibians as well. And so those are the most common injuries that we see coming into our care. And the common patients that we see are painted turtles, garter snakes, bull snakes, snapping turtles, box turtles, woodhouse toads, and tiger salamanders for the most common species. And there are a lot of different treatments that we can provide for these animals. Some of them are kind of new, which is pretty cool. And I wanted to just highlight a few here, one of which is amputation. Some animals that are wild can survive without a limb. It does depend on the limb, but we did have one woodhouse's toad patient that came in with a necrotic limb. And I wanted to highlight this just because our amphibians are so cool in how quickly they can heal from a very traumatic injury. From going from a giant necrotic limb to fully healed and ready for release 1 month later, our amphibians are so impressive in their healing capabilities. We also, as working with a lot of our different native species here, we got to develop some cool new techniques, one of which is a very unique turtle shell repair process that we use. And so we have a picture there of a box turtle that was hit by a car. You can see their wound where their shell is fractured. That shell is bone, and inside there you can actually see into that turtle where its organs are. So that one was a very severe traumatic injury, and something that a lot of different rehabilitation centers have done in the past is work with epoxy, zip ties, sometimes even like raw hooks to secure those hooks to the shell and pull those fractures together, so that it stays secure during the healing process. But we found that that takes a lot of time, and if an animal has a severe injury and they are bleeding out or need something done very quickly, we have to work a little faster. So we developed a technique using aluminum tape to actually make butterfly bandages that hold just as well as our epoxy and zip tie method, but it is much faster, much easier on the animal. And it stays really well. It holds for a very long time, but when it comes off, there is no damage to the shell. And most importantly, we got to do a cool study with the veterinary teaching hospital where we found out that those bandages are actually transparent on radiographs too. So if we get in a turtle that's in critical condition, need to repair that fracture, we can do that and then later go in for radiographs to see if there's internal damage. So it was really cool to be able to work on that and develop that new technique. And there's a lot of different ways that we are still developing different ways to treat our reptiles and amphibians in rehabilitation. But the number one way to treat these animals as wildlife patients is truly just preventive. There are a lot of animals that are beyond our help by the time they get to us. So being able to, again, educate people about our native species, when to look out for them, how to keep them safe is so, so crucial. And there are a lot of ways that you all can help too. If you want to help in your community, you can volunteer for different nonprofits, work with them to do the work that they're doing to help our native species. You can donate to those organizations, help them to continue doing their missions if you don't have the time capacity to help them out. You can do your own citizen science with iNaturalist. A lot of you are probably very familiar with doing that with our bird friends. And you can get educated. You can learn about our native species and research if you are looking to bring a reptile or amphibian pet home, learning about the animal, making sure you have the capacity and the right resources to care for them. But you guys already did that. You did that here today. Thank you. Doing awesome. And you can help in your yards and in your homes too, and you can make it fun. You can create habitats for these animals to live in. You can create small vernal pool systems that drain every winter for our frog friends. You can build pollinator patches, wood piles, all sorts of different things to help create an inviting space for our native species. And of course, walking your yard before you mow right now during this season when everything's growing really fast, it is a really, really important time to walk the area you're going to be mowing before you mow it. That way it alerts any small animals, your pheasants, they can move on, and then you can mow safely without having any chance of injuring them. You can also leave the leaves in the fall. That leaf litter on the ground helps to provide ground cover for overwintering species, as well as it helps our insects to thrive there so that in the springtime it's food for our native species. And being chemical conscious, so understanding the chemicals that we might be using on our gardens and in our yards, and knowing when to use those too. So for instance, if you do need to take care of some weeds in your yard and you are using a spray for that, knowing when maybe our amphibians are most active and avoiding that time to spray during the day can help a lot so that we're not accidentally spraying any of our little amphibians that are going to soak that up right into their skin. And if you want more information from us and want to get involved, there is our contact information for our website, reptilecenter.org, as well as our phone, email, and all. And I'll open it up for questions, and then I'll have our little animal ambassador friends here for you guys to come up and meet if you guys like.
Yeah, we'll do a few minutes of questions while we're still connected to Zoom, and then we'll have plenty of time for people that have seen the animals.
All right.
Please repeat the question.
Yes.
Two turtle questions. Is the box turtle, the western box turtle species?
The western box turtle, it also is a synonymous name. The question is this a western box turtle? It is just kind of synonymous with ornate box turtle, so it's kind of the same. Yeah, there are eastern box turtles. Those look a little bit differently. They don't have quite the yellow striping pattern on the eastern box turtles as our western box turtles do. Oh, they are separate species. Yes, sorry.
They're released in Colorado. This region, pretty much.
Has our snapping turtle range increased? It has moved a little bit. The distribution ranges for a lot of different species have kind of fluctuated a little bit throughout the years. We have seen more common snapping turtles further north than we typically have in the past. Same with our spiny softshell turtles, which are really cool species that are here ready for fall. Yeah.
What can you do about a bullfrog invasion in my pond? I think they came down the irrigation ditch.
Yeah, what do we do about bullfrog invasion? And that is a really hard topic. There's a lot of people that have a lot of different opinions on how to mitigate invasive species. There are some people that think culling those animals in large groups can help our native species. But from what I've seen from other places that have tried those mitigation techniques, if it's not a closed system, like a small island that is very far away that, animals cannot move in and out of that environment, it can work in those situations. But if it is not in a small contained environment, those culling kind of initiatives don't typically work. It's not a happy thing. It is a very sad process. Nobody appreciates that. And it doesn't need to do a lot, but there are different things that people are trying where we have seen success. In Boulder, the Parks Department has had a lot of success with restoration initiatives with native plant species. So taking out plants that are bullfrogs like and replacing them with plants that are native species like our northern leopard frog, which is in decline, and we have a lot of focus on restoration efforts for. It can help a lot. And we're still learning exactly which plants are good for which species. We're still doing research on that. But in general, it seems like as long as we have a system where the water drains at the end of the season, the bullfrogs don't stay there. A lot of our species are native species here. They like those ponds, those vernal pool systems that drain in the fall and then fill up in the spring. Some species even particularly utilize small bodies of water that only hold water for about 3 weeks. Our spadefoot toads that live a little bit further north. Usually you can see them up by Soapstone Prairie, but they just are out and about. They spend most of their lives just underground, burrowed down, hunkered down. But in the springtime, they come out for about 3 to 4 weeks. They lay their eggs in tiny little puddles of water, and those little tiny tadpoles transform into little froglets very, very quickly to adapt to those small bodies of water that dry up very quickly. So our native species are really good at adapting to that drying out period of the season. So making sure if we do want like ponds or water features in our yards, making them vernal pool systems can really help our native species.
When do tiger salamanders migrate to ponds to breed?
They move around a couple of different times a year, but most of the time it's really early. It's a lot earlier than we would think. Usually it's the end of February. Tiger salamanders are very commonly found out and about during like snowstorms. We've gotten in a few wildlife patients that were found in a snowy ditch because they prefer the colder temperature. It's not freezing cold, but a lot colder than we would think our reptiles and amphibians would like. And then late in the fall, they will also move around a bit as well. All right, any other questions?
I have a question, but I don't want to hog it.
Oh, no, you're good, go for it.
Okay, I have a dog that is a terrier that is prone to kill garter snakes. Is there any training methods, have you heard of one that I could train that dog not to go after my snakes in my yard?
There are actually quite a few dog training companies that work on like rattlesnake avoidance, which would be very similar. And a lot of the time, if you do work on that rattlesnake avoidance, it works with the other snakes as well. I'm not positive about this, but Summit Dog Training may be one of those, or they might have collaborated with somebody to do that. Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for.
Please join me in thanking Kate for her presentation. Thank you. And Harry, you can stop the recording. So Kate,